I don't want this to be a one-sided conversation. I feel like there are writers in the room and they might have very specific questions and also, or maybe know my work, so you can, but let's relate it to what you all are trying to do and just make it, you know, two-way street. So ask me anything. I also cook. Yes?
What is the community in your novel that you keep referring to? You said you've been there for years.
I think the community, the novel is largely set in the West Village, the far West Village. So I actually now, I've lived there so long, I actually know the old timers who've managed to hang on by their, you know, by their fingertips, truly, these days. And, you know, try to continue living the life they lived when they first came to New York, which is rather difficult considering it's become like Rodeo Drive already, you know, even worse, really. So it's a funny tension, and certainly all those, you know, S&M clubs and things like that are gone, or they've gone elsewhere. So where I still live used to be very desolate. It was all warehouses and, you know, kind of creepy coming home late at night. I mean, I used to, you know, have to really watch it because it was not residential, and now it's just, you know, it's like being in a theme park. So that's the community, the old timers, and also the artistic community, you know, who have managed to stay in New York.
Guerrilla girls.
They are actually. Yeah. They are, and they're still, you know, bitching. Does that answer your question? Yeah. But how to make that not a cartoon? Mm-hmm. I think I'm always trying to figure out how. I should have had the girl. Okay, never mind. Another book. But yeah, how to make those folks not types.
Can you read a paragraph?
Sure.
Okay.
But I will. I was going to end with a very short,
okay.
but I will. Anyone else have a craft question? Yes.
Well, a lot of what you talked about here, your influences are really steeped in ritual. And I was wondering what kind of rituals you observe as a writer, if any.
Well, I surround myself with a lot of objects that have great meaning. So I think my house is kind of like my kid. I think when she was 7, and she, you know, I didn't raise them in any religion, but she turned to me one day. She looked around at all the art and figurines and things from all over the world. She said, "Ma, I feel like we're living in a crazy church." Crazy people. And I said, you know, you're probably right. You know, because I used to like take her into different churches and temples just to show her and talk to her a little bit about what this all meant, you know, and we'd sit. So she, you know, when we traveled, I'd always visit churches of all sorts. So she knew, not quite why, but she knew this was some kind of, but it comforts me. So I think important, my writing area has these objects and these photographs and pieces of things that are meaningful to me, and they protect me. And I think it's a ritual. So I don't go through any, I mean, I do what everybody else does, pacing, vacuuming, anything to write, right? Check my email, turn off the internet, you know, and yank it out. It gets stupid. And that's ritual. You know, you kind of have to get through all those distractions and then cancel on them and then do the work before you can work. But I think being surrounded by those objects and mementos is very important to me. So it is like a Day of the Dead, the entire apartment. Is, you know, but it's not just altars to the dead, it's also altars to the living, you know, things people give me, things I've brought back from, you know, maybe the Philippines or elsewhere, you know, that are vibrant and alive. You know, so that's an important, I think the space is very important for me, although I can write anywhere. I mean, if I have to, I do it. You know, I'm not one to, it must be perfect, you know, because you'll never write. You're never perfect. Yes?
I have a question, maybe better addressed later. But I was just wondering what courses you teach at Long Island University and if you offer other courses that you teach outside.
We have a new MFA program, which is why they brought me. So I'm teaching fiction
Is that only
workshop.
open to students in the program?
Yeah, and then I'm teaching a seminar on Bologna in the spring, just because I need to do something, you know, about the books too, because I think sometimes a lot of young writers don't read enough. So, no, I mean, it's pretty full time, so there's no time to do any other kind of workshops. But for now. Yes, someone else.
In terms of looking at this list, is your work always experiential or sort of like history or sometimes sort of abstract? If I look at the list, it's pretty much what happened to you.
Typography? No, but I use what happened to me. I mean, this is what made me who I am. So I feel like when people ask about craft, it's sort of like, well, you have to bring yourself into it. Because I can talk to you about pacing, how to create tension, how to make your characters more complicated and interesting and plausible. Those are sort of generalities about good writing. But I think the key to great writing is what do you bring to, who are your characters, you know? You know what I mean? And only you can invent them, right? It's your imagination. So for me, these are all tied in, you know. The training I got as an actor made me more sensitive to trying to make my students go deeper with their characters. You know, they could write a beautiful sentence perhaps, but you're not digging deep enough, you know, so that they can surprise themselves. So and my life in music, I used to have a band, made me appreciate ordinary speech, because I love those songs that are silly, lyrics that are terse, you know, the way people talk, you know. I don't think you have to be highfalutin to be profound all the time. Now, your question about do I ever, yeah, I mean, I think
it's scary. Do you go to the unknown? It's absolutely not experiential. That's just.
Of course,
Yeah.
you should read this.
No, I have. But it looks like you start there. Is that my understanding?
I have to.
Yeah.
I have. But I mean, that was all imagined. You know, the opening chapter, I didn't go to any vigil. I just sat in my apartment and just imagined, and you know, what a vigil would be like for him. So for me, you know, but you're bringing all your, what is it? It's your, I don't call it that. Well, it's baggage, but it's, I brought my suitcases. In my closet. Yes.
Jessica, you mentioned to me adapting Dog Eaters for the stage. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yes. That was a great process because, you know, it involved making very hard decisions. You couldn't do that entire novel. It would be ridiculous. So it was kind of like, whose story did you want to tell in the 1.5 to 2 hours you had? And what would, you know, enthrall an audience? And what was really important for the moment that you were doing this production? So it was a lot about playing around because I had 1 million characters in Dog Eaters, and they all have very interesting and important stories. I mean, you know, so I had to sort of really think, well, maybe I have too many of one thing, so, you know, I don't need 2 of those guys. I take 1. And it went through many, many changes. We did it in California first as a workshop production. And in that production, I used to have the 1950s flashbacks. It was very beautiful and dreamy and all this crap, you know. And then it would have the upfront stuff. So there was this beautiful contrast to the past and to the present of the 80s. And when we came to New York, I got rid of all that beautiful romantic stuff. And some people thought that was unfortunate, but I wanted it to be mean and lean and kind of, you know, really, I also thought that a New York audience is very different from a very generous California audience that doesn't mind sitting there and kind of really, whoa. And New York is like, what? Where are, you know, I said, oh no, we're not, it's going to be, you know, pretty ruthless. So I learned that there was nothing lost. The book was always going to be there, and when people said, why didn't you have so-and-so in the play? Go read the book, you know. And it gave me a chance to rewrite the book again in a certain way. I had characters in the play that were very, very minor in the novel, and I could give them a life and really have fun with them. So I love the process of adaptation. And I think that you learn what works in an actor's mouth and is not necessarily what works on a printed page, you know, because the reading thing is a whole other experience than watching and looking at an actor pretending to be a real person. Yeah. So it teaches you about what dialogue is too much, and they wouldn't be giving those beautiful poetic speeches. I remember my director saying, "That's writerly of you. You're doing beautiful writing right now." I said, "What do you mean? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing?" He goes, "Yeah, but nobody talks like that. Nobody talks like that." Because I was having to deal with the stage, you know. Yeah. So, yes.
You had mentioned that when you first began writing this novel, you were writing it in first person and then made the switch to third person?
In Toxicology, yes.
Can I ask why you chose to make that choice and also what possibilities the third person lended itself?
Well, first person, you're limited to that point of, first person is really easy for me. I'm good at it. I have a good time. I know how to do it. And I thought that's too easy. And third person is tougher. And I really wanted to have that detachment, to be able to really observe the character in a way that, you know, could come in for a close-up or go out for a long shot. Yeah. So it was a real conscious decision. And each draft I was sort of, oh, should I go back to the first? You know, I went through many drafts after I turned it in on, you know, exactly when I was supposed to. The first time. But I played around with it, by the way. I wasn't sure, but in the end, I was glad I did. It was a challenge again. I wanted that challenge. You know, it's kind of fun. It's fun to just, you know, say to yourself, if this is your third or fourth book, try something, you know, work a muscle you've not worked enough. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a question. I wondered if you have always had, did you ever belong to a writer's group? Do you have a friend or someone who's a trusted first reader that you give things to before you even send them to an editor? And how did you know as a young writer when to put your work out there, when to sort of reveal yourself?
When I was a poet, I used to share my poems with trusted poet friends. I mean, we all did that because we try to help each other, and some people got destructive too. Like, I don't know about this, you know, because we needed each other. So we had a loose, you know, we sort of just did it. It wasn't official. It wasn't like a writing group. There was none of that back then. And I would just send things out, then I'd get tired of being rejected, so I never sent things out. How about that? I never did. You know, I started to, and then I'd get these form, you know, like you write to the New Yorker, and I'm like 15, please. You know, thank you very much, you know, whatever they say. And I thought, oh my God, is that it? You know, even I knew, you know, this is it. This is all they're going to say. So I just didn't send it out. until I felt really, really ready to, somebody would ask me, I'm doing a journal, I would like you to contribute a poem. You know, so there was a lot of that going on for poets. So you'd give it to that magazine or that anthology. That's how I got started being published. I sort of didn't send it out after a while. I was having fun doing poetry readings. It was very alive, you know, and I wasn't so worried about being published when I was young. Funny, huh?
Yeah.
Now everybody's so worried. You know, relax. Much later, the novel I knew was dependent on a lot of things because I started to see as I got older, my friends who were fiction writers, you know, the troubles, you know, they would be like, oh, they're just, you know, not even responding to me. And then people started talking about agents. So we're talking, whatever, the 70s, I guess, agents. I thought, oh my God, is that what they do in New York? Agents. You know, poets don't have agents, you know, unless you're, I don't know what poets have. So I thought, well, how do you get one? So I talked to this wonderful friend of mine who had an agent. I said, how'd you find her? He goes, oh my God. You know, I was so ignorant. And he said, look, he told me what to do. And he said, I'll talk to her if she can read your manuscript. And, you know, if she thinks there's something there, you know, she'll comment on it. She's very generous. So I sent it on. Now, if I hadn't known him, I don't know, frankly, what would have happened. And, you know, it turned out she had a lot of clients. She didn't need another young writer, you know, but she very generously said to me, I think there's a young agent in my agency who might like your work. Who might? I can't promise you anything, blah, blah, blah. You know, so, but if those events hadn't occurred, I really don't know Noreen. Now I tell my students sort of how to go about it. I mean, I know the professional way you do it now, you know, and so I pass that on to them, that there are ways, you know, you don't just throw your manuscript at somebody, you know. You make a query. If they're interested, they'll say go ahead, or otherwise you're going to kill a lot of trees and spend a lot of money on postage. And it's just, yeah, it's gotten very, very, there are a lot of, the sad thing to me now, I think for a young writer, but, you know, who's not young, starting out, there are just so many hurdles, and there's no more room for making foolish mistakes. And I think the foolishness is important. The foolishness and the blindness is important. You know, everybody's so professional now. It's kind of taken the sexy out of sexy. You know, I mean, I think it's important to stumble around and to make a fool of yourself. I do, you know, but we're also, you know, so it's become, it's different. It's very different. When I was young, it was not like that. So the writing groups and all the support that people have now, they can find, you know, we had to make up for ourselves. And it was casual. Noreen, do you mind looking at this poem? You know. Do you mind? No, maybe I mind today. Sometimes nobody had time for you. So, you know, you sort of had to do it all yourself. So how's our time? Because I did want to.
We have time for you to read, or take a.
Right, or more questions, please. Yes.
When you decided to throw out the book you were writing and
Yes.
switched to toxicology, was it a wrenching decision? I mean, or was it?
No, actually, it was a big relief, and I may go back to it one day.
Was it related to toxicology at all, or it was just a completely different?
And it wasn't even set here. It was set in another city. There's a lot of nice stuff there that I, you know, didn't want to toss, but one day I'll go back to it and look at it. It wasn't wrenching. That's why I knew I was onto something, because I felt bad for my editor, perhaps, you know, like maybe it was wrenching for him. But he turned out to be really okay. I think he knew You know, why? Why force something? So, but he was a little leery, like, you really think you can do a first draft in a few months?
And did you?
I did.
Good.
I did. So, and it became, you know, I mean, then I worked on it more and more. But he liked it, so that was what was important. He understood. The energy was just there. The other one was like, not. And I think you have to keep that momentum. Momentum is important. The energy when you write, the energy in your work, that's really important to keep, don't you think, Alex?
Yes.
He's a writer too.
I think it's the most important.
It is. It's because you don't have a cheerleading squad there at 2 in the morning. You know, it's yourself and your material. And if there's momentum and passion, you'll see it through. So that's the stuff to keep, you know, keep going. How do you do that? It's different every time.
Do you have everything developed in your mind before you start writing, or you take that scene and?
No. And it's sort of, when it's going, it starts writing itself in an odd sort of way. And I have the voices in my head, so they sort of, you know, you stop me, you're tired, okay, I did 3 chapters, good night, you know, but I don't sleep, and then it's roiling, you know, like, well, maybe I'll have her, oh, and she opens the door, and this and that, and somebody closes the door. You know, it's going, you go to the gym, and you're on the treadmill. That's a really great place to work it out. Really, when I have, like, problems, you know, what am I going to do next? It's that repetitive motion, and I think, you know, you run the scenes in your head, and you go, maybe it's helpful to me. Maybe not for everyone, but that repetitive motion, but you're also physical, and you're doing this thing that's not very hard to do, but it's good for you, and you're building up steam, and you're heating up, and it's great. I think it's good for the brain. And then it sort of, some way happens. Some way happens. Some little light goes off, and you go, I'll try it. And sometimes it's not the answer, you know, but it shows you a direction to go in. And I try to come right back and work. You know, it's really about not letting that momentum stop. Very important. So momentum, urgency, very important. Any more questions? Who asked me to read a little scene? What do you want to hear?
It was about the neighborhood, or the West Village, something
There's a lot of-
toxicology that portrays the West Village.
Little West Village.